Good afternoon, everybody. This is Rachel Treese on Flex in the City, and today I am delighted to be joined by Martyn Cuff, who has over 30 years of corporate experience in financial services, and I'm going to call the Transformer. Welcome, Martyn.
Hi, Rachel. Great to be here. Thanks very much.
You're very welcome, and you are the first Welshman to join us on Flex in the City.
Yeah, I didn't know that, but we get everywhere as Welsh people eventually.
I know, absolutely, absolutely. So I'd love to know, you've worked in financial services for over 30 years, so love to know a little bit more about you and your story and how you came to be doing the work that you're doing.
Okay, great. Well, look, I was born in Wales, as you say. I actually lived my first 20 years in Wales, and so I found that I wasn't that good at many things back in my younger years, but I was comfortable with numbers. And so I thought, well, maybe I should kind of move in that direction. But I didn't actually want to go to university. So I went straight into the workplace after my A-levels. And then I started working for Barclays back at that time. And then worked there for a few years. And but that's when curiosity started to come in my direction. And it was around about the age of kind of 18, 19 when I became a lot more curious about life. I haven't diminished that curiosity ever since. And I thought to myself, well, there must be more to life than what was going on at the time. So I thought maybe I should try to get up to London, do a bit of a Dick Whittington and go off to London in search of fame and fortune. So at the age of 20, that's what I did. I moved up to London with Barclays to, as the Australians say, go walkabout. I still am going walkabout right now, and hopefully will continue to do so for the rest of my life.
And how is that? I'm curious, how has your curiosity served you in your life and career to date?
I think curiosity means that you don't accept what you're naturally told by people. It means that it forces you to think for yourself. Doesn't always mean you come up with the correct conclusions, but it does create that question in your mind. Why is someone saying that? Why do we do it that way? It means that you therefore don't necessarily settle for the status quo. You think that actually things could be a bit better or done differently. And it doesn't always mean that you know how they could be done better, and it doesn't always mean that you're actually right, but it poses that question. And I think if you pose that question then to yourself and then to maybe others around you, then you start opening up doors, you open up possibilities, you open up opportunities. And that then can take you in all manner of directions. Often you don't know which directions. But without that initial spark, you will potentially just live within the parameters within which you're told. And I think that limits your own growth and ultimately the growth of society. And
so up to now, curiosity has never killed the cat? Or do you have 9 lives?
it hasn't. It's brought me into a few scrapes because you do end up putting your head above the parapet when sometimes you should keep it down. In corporate life, it's a bit like a game of corporate snakes and ladders with your career. And we all know there are situations where it's time to be quiet, head down and just get on with it. And there's times when you should put your head up and have a look around. And so curiosity can sometimes be a double-edged sword. So I think with curiosity, you need to bring wisdom. Otherwise, it can be dangerous. But where do you get wisdom from? Well, you might be lucky and be naturally born with a lot of it. But to be honest, most of us have to get it through experience. How do you get experience? Well, you need to be curious. So it's a bit of a circle that way. So I would always encourage people, be curious. Be careful with your curiosity, build up that wisdom, and then hopefully the two can combine into a virtuous circle as you go through life.
Absolutely. So talking about wisdom, as you know, Martyn, I always do a little bit of research on leadership and find out a little bit more about what kind of leader you are. And I found some incredible words that have been said about you. So if you don't mind, I'm going to quote something now. So this says, I worked with Martyn on the HR transformation program at Alliance Group globally. I experienced Martyn as an outstanding leader, inspiring, motivating, ambitious, persistent, resilient, insightful, living up to team values and able to create and drive a real team spirit. And throughout the sometimes challenging and very difficult change journey, Martyn demonstrated high commitment, passion, engagement, focusing very unselfishly on the greater good. You can't get better words than that, can you, Martyn? That's just an incredible accolade for you and who you are.
Well, it's very, very kind words and very humbling, of course. But that kind of feedback comes from an environment, from a culture. It's not just a reflection of me; it's a reflection of those around me, because we all help each other out. And so I think it's about what environment, what culture are you part of? How do you contribute to that? What are those social norms that you put in place? And I would like to think that on that particular program that's referenced in that feedback, that a number of my colleagues that I worked with would also get similar feedback. It wasn't just a case of me being some kind of hero on that. Teamwork is one of my most highly prized values, probably a reflection of my Welsh roots with mining and rugby and choirs. And so for me, it's all about the teamwork. If the team does well, then individually we'll do well. If you try to stand out as a superstar yourself at the expense of the team, temporarily that might work, but long term that doesn't work.
Yeah, and I'm interested, when did you actually realize that you were probably quite a decent leader? At what point were you aware of that?
It's been an emerging journey. I fall into the camp of being born and thinking I was a follower, not a leader. If you said to me when I was 10, 15, 20, 25 even, you're a leader and you'll probably be recognized as a fairly decent one, I wouldn't have believed you. And that's probably because I was brought up in a pattern of believing that leaders were some kind of alpha male. They were intellectually the smartest people in the room. They were born to lead. They had a network and a level of confidence that simply meant they were right. And that's a pattern that ran through my head for many years. And as I went through my own career journey, then I started to realize that was a false pattern. Then I challenged my own thinking about that pattern, and then that just evolved up until today and continues to evolve.
Very good. So Martyn, what advice would you give your own children as a leader and as a man and as a father? What advice would you give to your own children or someone else's right now when they're thinking about their own future career in this world?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think on the topic of leadership, everybody has the potential to be a leader. And I passionately believe this. I try to have opinions on things, but not to be too opinionated. I think there's quite a difference between the two. But on this one, I am quite opinionated because I really believe everybody has leadership potential. That's because leadership should not be defined as looking after X thousands of staff with X size budget. That's one way to define leadership, and it's been a historically, or it's been one that's been used historically quite a lot. But you can have situational leadership, you can have moral leadership, you can have expert leadership. There are so many opportunities to lead, because what does lead mean? Lead means to show the way. It's showing the way to others, which they then follow, because a leader's are not a leader unless they've got followers, they've got fellowship. So you show the way to people, and then if they follow, then you become a leader. whether it says it on an org chart or not, irrelevant. And there are so many situations where you can show the way to somebody. And therefore, for that period of time, you are a leader. Maybe you're not a leader for all of your life, but for that moment, you're a leader. So I believe everybody has leadership capability. So that's one message I would give to my children and to younger people. Maybe the next thing I would say is that, and maybe this is not such an issue for the younger generation, but still is to a degree. You know, we are a result of a society, of a system that created lots of pyramids. Pyramids meaning organizations that had managers looking after staff, and you didn't trust the managers, so you had more managers managing the managers who managed the staff, and it kind of went on and on until you get to the director level. And those sort of hierarchical command and control organizations, they still exist all around the world today.
They're very orange in the reinventing organizations terminology.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, and it's important to recognize they still exist. You can't deny reality. And I think you have to know how to navigate them. So one thing I would say to younger people, and my kids as well, is recognize they exist and learn how to navigate them. But as importantly, maybe more importantly going forward, and I go towards more of a teal organization, to use that reference you mentioned then, which is around thinking about life as nodes and connectors, the network. And within a network, we know you have nodes and you have connectors. Now, I wrote an article on this, and I posted it on my LinkedIn account and on my blog, and it's entitled, "Why I Do Not Want My Children to Be Managers." Because I think the role of being a manager is a dying role. And if my kids came to me and said, "Dad, I want to be a manager," I would ask them to reflect on that ambition. Management activity, prioritizing things, budgeting, organizing, that's still relevant. But being a manager, I think, is from a previous era. If you think of nodes and nodes and connectors within a network, then as a node, you're an expert, you're a geek, you know something in a deep way that others don't. And then connectors, they know how to bring together different nodes to create something new, some value for the end consumer. Now, it shouldn't be lost here that the connectors, they're experts as well. It's just they're expert in a particular topic or a particular set of skills. So let me give you a quick analogy. Think of a farmer and think of a chef. A farmer is really an expert in creating certain individual items: beef, chicken, tomatoes, cabbage, whatever it might be. A chef knows how to mix together different nodes into a sumptuous meal and then serve it up to their consumer. So in that regard, the chef is a connector because they know how to connect these individual nodes together to deliver a wonderful meal. It means that the chef has an empathy for the nodes, for the farmers, and the farmers have an empathy for the connector because they need to know what they need to produce and what kind of varieties, etc. So it's not a case of saying I'm only a node or I'm only a connector. It's having that self-awareness to say, actually, I think I'm probably biased towards being a connector of situations, of people, of ideas, or I'm more biased towards being a node, an expert in certain individual topics. And that, I think, is an interesting way to think about yourself and the value you bring to a situation. And that can be for profit, not for profit, in a sporting sense, whatever it might be.
And what kind of leader you want to become, to your point.
Well, exactly, because within that environment, you don't say, well, on the org chart, I sit at level X with so many people beneath me. Therefore, that's my definition of leadership. I think that's just, I was never a fan of it. And I think it's becoming increasingly defunct and outdated. So when you think of a community, you need to think, well, what value do I bring to that community? How do I earn my place in that community? And that, I think, is a better set of questions to answer. Not easy to answer. I don't pretend they're easy, but a better set of questions.
So curious. We're getting very curious, aren't we, in this interview? I'd love to know about which leaders, leader or leaders, have inspired you in life.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, over the 3+ decades, I've seen a lot of leadership or so-called leadership. People I would highlight that maybe the listeners might recognize. So John Harvey Jones, he was the ex-chairman of ICI. He was the original troubleshooter on the BBC programs in the 1980s. I was drawn to him. He was a self-starter. He got on with life. He didn't wait for life to come to him. He popularized the idea that you could go into a situation with external views and experiences and troubleshoot. And he did it not for self-advancement. He wasn't trying to massage his ego. He had a real passion for solving problems which other people were struggling with. And I was very drawn to that. That's probably one of the early signs that, for me, a change and transformation is what I'm naturally drawn towards. I don't run away from it, as some people do. I run towards it. Chris Anderson would be another one. He's the head of the TED organization. And what I like about what he's done is that he's been a massive force for democratizing knowledge in our society, bringing voices of so many people into an accessible, free way. All you need is internet connection, and you can listen to some of the most wonderful people on the planet, something that was never possible years gone by. So I think what Chris has done is wonderful leadership. Simon Sinek is another one.
A famous TED talker himself, isn't he?
Exactly right. And Start With Why, and he's been popularized. But what I like about Simon is his ability to convey things in a simple, consumable manner, which in a world that gets becoming ever more complex, people that can simplify situations for consumption, I think should be applauded. And then somebody within the financial services world, Mohammed Al-Arian. Now, he's the chief economic advisor to Allianz, and has done a number of different roles over the years. You find him regularly on Bloomberg and CNBC and stuff. I mean, he's wonderful because he's very bright. He's extremely well connected, but he's very humble. And I think that combination of intelligence and insight, but having an ego which is under control, is a very attractive combination. I think it draws people to listen to somebody like that. And so they're people that in their own way, I think, demonstrate qualities, skills, values, which I find aspirational.
Wow, fantastic. And so that leads me on quite nicely to ask you about your own values. You have mentioned teamwork and Welsh culture and the singing, rugby. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to that, Martyn?
Yeah, well, teamwork certainly is my number one value in any situation. It's about the we, not the I. And anyone that tries to put themselves ahead of the team, however smart they might be, I think they don't have a place in that team. They need to step away and do something else. But other things which are important to me: meritocracy, genuine meritocracy. I think it's the power of ideas, wherever they come from, whatever the person is in terms of ethnicity or gender or religion, whatever it might be. As long as people live within the bounds of society, of the community they're in, as long as they follow the laws of the land, then people should be free to express themselves in that way, which enriches the society. That I find attractive, even if I don't agree with their views on certain things, as long as it's within the bounds of acceptability and the rules of that community, then I think that's good. Authenticity. I try to be authentic myself, warts and all. I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. I say things I shouldn't sometimes. But hopefully people, when they're talking with me, they get me for the good or the bad. I don't like putting on a front, some kind of shiny, happy face. that behind the scenes, that I'm thinking something completely different. Of course, there are situations where you need to behave in certain different ways. I'm not talking about not doing that, but being, you're demonstrating your honest views and your feelings and your heart. And I always appreciate people who make an effort in life. As Woody Allen once said, 80% of life is about turning up. And I think that's the case. Get up in the morning, get out, see what happens to life. We're on this planet for a very short space of time, so make the most of it while you can.
Absolutely. And so what kind of people have you not connected with over your working career?
Yeah, and this doesn't mean that they're wrong, I'm right. I think we all find people we resonate with and don't. But the people that I've found that I don't resonate with are people that put themselves first. They're willing to sacrifice other people for their own greater good. What people that don't do what they say they're going to do something, but they don't. People who avoid responsibility and deflect it to others when the going gets tough, particularly if they call themselves leaders. I mean, I think leaders need to take the bullet for the team, right? They can turn around and have a debate with the team then afterwards and say, look, you guys, you didn't really perform well there, but I took the bullet for you, because I think that's what leaders do. And people that don't take a bullet for their team, honestly, I struggle with them defining themselves as leaders. People that don't have straight conversations with their staff. I've seen so many situations in my corporate career where the individual concerned would really benefit from some straight talking from their boss, and that doesn't happen for whatever reason, and that just doesn't help anybody, and ends up in a bad situation eventually. Also, people who've got a lack of genuine interest in lifting others up. I think part of being a leader is about being a coach. It's about finding, helping people to be the best they can be. And that might sound a bit twee or a bit cliche, but I really believe a lot of leadership is about coaching, and it's about lifting others up. And if you don't have that genuine desire to see others advance, even to the point that they become your boss, because frankly, they are more capable than you are, well, so be it. We're all on an individual journey, and we should make the most of that potential, whatever we've got. So I think a leader, a core part of their job is to promote others' potential. And when I see people not doing that, then I struggle with that. And finally, maybe those that create a bit of a negative culture through fear or micromanagement, that kind of thing, which we've all seen. I mean, that just doesn't get the best out of anybody. It might temporarily feed the ego of the person creating that environment, but that doesn't get the best out of the team or the individual. So there's some of the traits that I've seen over the years, which I don't particularly resonate with.
Yeah, and so that's a beautiful segue onto what skills do you think, Martyn, are needed by financial services leaders now and as we evolve and move on?
So I think we're at a fundamental time of transformation. I talk about industrial era 4.0 a lot, and I make no apology for it, because I think we're at a period of change which is as big as when the steam engine came along a couple of years ago and revolutionized society. I really do. And so, and I think most people still today do not appreciate the fundamental forces that are changing our society. That said, I think there are still relevant traditional skills which are important to the up and coming leaders of today and tomorrow, and they would be things like good financial analysis, a good underwriting capability if you're in insurance, or risk management, or being a good investment manager if you're in asset management, or a good banker, knowing who to lend to, who not to lend to, marketing, operations, compliance, data privacy, all those things which are traditional skills, still very relevant, even in a world increasingly open to disruption by AI. I think they're still relevant. But then let me give you an example of some skills which I think are more elevated and people really need to think about. And I'll start off with language. And when I say language, people will probably immediately think about, well, French or German or Spanish or something. What I'm talking about is Python, Java, Swift. I think not everybody's going to become a coder. That said, For people who are ambitious and coming through the ranks, then I don't think it's a good enough answer just to say, oh, coding, oh, I leave that to the IT department. I leave that to somebody else. Python, for example, is a very popular language. It can be learned with a bit of dedication. It can be learned fairly easily. And you see it being used in a lot of places. Now, if you know how to use Python, it gives you a greater empathy for those that use it on a day-to-day basis. So back to my nodes and connectors.
Yeah.
If you want to be a great connector, then you need to have empathy for your nodes. If your nodes are using Python to do AI, to do data science, for example, if you appreciate that, even if you don't do it day in, day out yourself, if you appreciate it, you'll have a far stronger connection to the node. The more nodes you're connected to, the smarter connector you are. If you're a smarter connector, you're going to be more creative. So it's recognizing things that you need to learn. If you want to be a node in that, then you better do it really well. But even if it's a connector, then you better have an empathy for it. Another one is CX, consumer experience.
Yeah.
Customer centricity has been around for decades. It's not new, but the version that we see today on the table in front of us is CX. And that's driven by internet native companies who came along, and from the very beginning, they were designed in a one-click type of Amazon mindset. So that then it raises the bar on the whole consumer experience for everybody. And so you really need to understand how you actually do CX. If you want to be a CX consultant, you better know it as well as anybody else, if not better. But even if you want to be a modern leader, you need to have an empathy for it. And I think there's some of the things that people need to consider today, which certainly they would have considered less even 10 years ago, certainly 20, 30 years ago.
Wow. So industrial era 4.0 is what you're calling it, Martyn.
Absolutely.
Wow. Fantastic.
And it's driven by a whole range of technologies, not just information technology, but biotechnologies. And you see it in all walks of life. But we're in this deceiving zone at the moment. There's a model, I think it's called the 5D model. And one of the steps in our model is a deceptive zone where there's a lot going on, but it's kind of beneath the surface. It hasn't yet fully disrupted life. But then the exponential curve kicks in, and before you know it, it's running far faster than you can control it. And I wrote an article about exponential growth quite recently and posted it on my blog, because I think humans are very clearly not designed to recognize and to handle exponential growth. It's just, we're just not programmed. At best, we can handle linear growth or a linear change. And even that is a struggle. But exponential growth blows our mind. It's why Singularity University is their mission to try to bring the appreciation of exponential change to everyone's awareness. And you've seen it in the COVID-19 terrible situation we're all living with, which is an exponential situation itself. And you've seen how all walks of society, politicians, companies, markets, have all failed to appreciate the impact of what exponential change does. So my message to everybody listening is get on top of exponential, meaning understand how it works and look around at change that's happening and think to yourself, is that exponential, or is it linear, or is it even just less than linear, just very small changes? Because change has to be categorized. You can't just say change. That's not good enough nowadays. Change has to be categorized. Transformation, which I call change on steroids, transformation is much more down the exponential side. What that means is that it's not just about being a little bit smarter. The old saying about do things right or do the right things. Yes, we need to do things right. But really, what Industrial Era 4.0 brings is a much greater emphasis on doing the right things. It's about rewriting the rules. And it's not just the operating model. This really fundamentally changes the business model. It brings new business models in that never existed. It kills off some old business models, and those in the middle that are neither killed off nor invented need to fundamentally change. And I passionately believe that most elements of society, even today, do not appreciate it enough and are not moving fast enough to capture the opportunity or mitigate the risk.
Yeah, absolutely. So that leads me to my final, no, not quite the final question, the penultimate question, which is around your book reading. We both share two things in common. One is our passion for transformation, and secondly, our passion for reading. So do you have a book that you could recommend to me, Martyn?
I do, and actually, let me just mention quickly on books, and again for the listeners, maybe some of the younger listeners. I never properly read a book other than to sit some exams until I was about 20. I was always a fidgeter when I was younger. I wanted to go and do stuff rather than sit and read. I just found that just too boring and sedentary. And then one of the very earliest books I read was In Search of Excellence, which was a very important book back in the early 80s, as people might remember. And that really, and then along with John Harvey Jones' Troubleshooter books, and that really started my passion for reading, which has never stopped. So you're never too old to start something, I would say. In terms of books I read, on my LinkedIn account, I keep a running list of books I would recommend. There's about 150 books on there in different categories. But if I had to choose one for people now to maybe go and take a read of, it's Lifespan. And this is by David Sinclair. He's a professor at Harvard, and he's trying to solve a disease called death. And he views death as a disease, not an inevitability. So entropy, which is the fact that the universe ultimately tries to break apart. We don't like order, we prefer disorder. So, and that's what our bodies are trying to do. And that's why eventually they give up the ghost, because they've kind of, entropy wins out. So what he's trying to do is to come up with ways to actually control that entropy, control at a cellular level how our bodies evolve during our lives to at least extend life and maybe one day even cure death. So it's a fascinating book. One, it's just a great read. He makes it very accessible. Secondly, it's a pretty important topic to all of us, our lives. And if you want to then make a connection to financial services, then I'm a passionate believer in capitalism as a mechanism, as long as then it's done in a responsible way and used for advancement of society. Financial services is at the heart of that. Financial services itself needs to evolve, and in the context of greater longevity, which we know is a story that we've all been tracking the last decade or so. I mean, this takes that topic and extends it significantly. So if you read this book and you become a believer that maybe this longevity thing is going to carry on, notwithstanding our best attempts at obesity and trying to do ourselves harm with what we eat, then if you take that seriously, then financial services has an incredibly important role to play in supporting a society where longevity is seen as a positive rather than as a negative, which unfortunately it could be seen if you're not careful. Because what he also talks about is not just having a longer life, it's having a longer, healthier life. There's no point living 20 years longer if it's nothing but dementia for 20 years. That's probably not people's idea of a longer life. If it's longer and healthier, then suddenly you've got 80, 90, 100-year-olds who are active in society. So that's a book I would recommend to people. But there's another 149 of them on my LinkedIn account if they want to look.
Oh, I'm going to have a look. That's for sure, Martyn. I'm definitely going to have a look. So that leads me to my final question. It's a nice follow-on from that book. What would you like your own legacy in financial services to be?
Yeah, I think I'll probably answer this in three ways. So I've got the operational level, the kind of stuff I've been paid to do over the years, which is to fix situations, to improve them, to turn them around, to make them better. So hopefully when I look back, I can say, well, in most situations I encountered, I left it better than I found it, because that's what I'm getting paid to do. But then there's at the people level, what I hope is that those people I've come into contact with over the years, I've made a small contribution to their own story, their confidence, their knowledge, and uplifted them. And in that way, helping them in a small way to fulfill their own potential. And then maybe the third angle would be at the moral level, trying to follow leadership standards and values which others find interesting and attractive to follow, and which ultimately translates into a stronger reputation for financial services. So they would probably be three aspects that I hopefully look back on and say, yes, I made a contribution to the team effort.
Martyn Cuff, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for being a fantastic guest on Flex and the City. You really are the transformer. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.